Hey everyone, this is Piano Man Steve Lungrin, founder of LearningMusicIsFun.com, where we teach piano players how to play rock, pop, and country music. Thank you for tuning in for this inaugural edition of my new video series, Conversations with the Masters. I'm very excited to say that we have a master of the music industry with us today. This is Bill Champlin that's going to sit in with us for our first episode. And Bill's got quite a few credits in his career. The most notable and obvious one to most people would be that he was a front man and a keyboard player for almost 30 years with the mega hit band Chicago. He's also had a great solo career. He's been one of the most prolific session singers in the industry ever, and has been a hit songwriter. So we're talking about someone who's sung smash hits, sung backing vocals on smash hits, and he's performed smash hits all over the world, both in his own name and with Chicago. So it is my distinct pleasure to welcome to our show Mr. Bill Champlin. How you doing, Bill?
Hey man, I'm up and running. You forgot the part about lifting the amplifiers into the
yes. Since Bill went back to being a solo artist, he is now not using roadies the way he used to, and he's building his strength again to lift crap in and out of bands.
Build it up to where I can pick up a B3 with one hand. Thank you.
I tell you, you are dedicated if you're still using a B3 under those circumstances instead of this.
At this point of the game, I don't take the gig unless they got a B3 there. It's kind of coming down to that. I mean, at least for this kind of stuff I'm doing. The gig I played this weekend was with my original band, the Sons.
Oh yeah.
And we played a place up in San Francisco that it was kind of a weird little gig, but it ended up being kind of fun. Our drummer was kind of under the weather. We used a sub that it didn't work out that great, but we still started at the beginning, played through the middle, and ended at the ending. So there we go.
Show must go on.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I appreciate you being here with us. First and foremost, I need to disclose to everyone that everyone in my community here of piano players knows that I'm a Billy Joel and Elton John fan, but I don't talk as much about the fact that I'm also a big Chicago fan, and so I found Bill through that group and recall very much I'm a child of the 80s. So I grew up hearing you and Peter Cetera on American Top 40 with Casey Kasem all the time, and certainly have enjoyed. I've probably seen you guys I saw you with the band about a dozen times probably. So it's really a pleasure to talk to you, and I think that it's going to be fun.
So you were a glutton for punishment, were you?
Well, let's say that the show was pretty similar all 12 times, but it was very enjoyable.
Exactly what I was saying.
It was very enjoyable. I spread it out. I didn't do it in 12 consecutive years.
Oh, good. Now we're talking.
Yeah, and also this is a follow-up. Bill was nice enough to talk to me on the phone about 14 years ago. I had contacted him. I'd contacted you through email, and you were doing a stint out at Caesar's Palace in Atlantic City, and you said, and I just had some questions about the industry, and you said, hell, call me now. I've got nothing else to do during the day because we're holed up. So I learned a lot of fun stuff, and so that's why I thought you'd be a great guest. So let's start at the beginning here. Mostly what we want to do is we want to learn a little bit about your musical story, and then I just want to ask you questions about what it's like to work inside the industry. Where did you grow up, Bill?
Well, I was born in Oakland. And up until my parents got divorced when I was about almost 5.5 or 6, I lived there. My mother was a songwriter and a piano player and singer, for that matter. So she kind of had me doing piano lessons and stuff right up until the divorce happened. And then we moved to Santa Cruz, California, and we couldn't really get the piano up this one dirt road up which we lived at this really nice house up at the end of it, but the access to it was a little weird. So the piano went away for a while, and I decided between maybe 5 and 10 that I'd be either a fireman or a cowboy or something. Typically kid guy, you know what I mean?
Right.
So we went, and then later on I started taking, around when I was about 11 maybe, I took up guitar, started to play guitar a lot. And then, I had a teacher I think sixth grade teacher who said in Santa Barbara who said you should get this guy piano lessons. So I got back to playing piano again. So and since then it's really been kind of piano and guitar has been my move. So going back and forth. Hear something on the piano, I try to learn it on guitar. Hear something on guitar, I try to learn it on piano. If not piano, organ. I mean, I've kind of become a little bit more of a specialist in terms of playing organ. You know,
Hammond A3.
Yeah, Hammond organ. Yeah. Back to the hernias, right?
Well, you know, there really isn't anything that sounds quite like one of those things. And
well, they get better every year. The patches and the I know Hammond company's doing some portables at this point in the game that are quite good. I mean, they're better than they're better than they have been in a long time. And every year they get a little bit. I mean, it started off with sampling, and that wasn't that great. Then I went to modeling, and now I think it's profiling is what they're calling it. So, I mean, I know one of the guys that works over at Hammond pretty well, and I've been in touch with those guys for a long time, and they're pretty cool. They got it pretty together.
That's good, because for me, the problem with Hammond patches has always been I've never been able to really simulate the Leslie as well as I'd like to, and they always have the little modulation knob and whatnot, but it gets you through, but I kind of avoid it unless I absolutely have to play with it.
It's funny because like when the XB2 came out, some of those other things came out. Roland has a good piece of gear. Nord has had maybe the best of all of them at this point in the game. Korg, I mean, I love the Korg CX3 just in terms of being able to cruise around down to a rehearsal, bring it in, throw it through an amp, put it through a relatively good size amp, or even through a PA system. And to the audience, it really doesn't sound that much different.
Okay.
And the thing I like about the CX3, the Korg at least that I've liked for the years that I've been playing it, is that it feels more like a Hammond.
So do you feel like now this is a question that I always have to ask musicians in this day and age, because I'm pretty shameless about this. Are you pretty well versed with improv and in all 12 keys, or do you have a few that you studiously avoid trying to improv in, if you can?
I have most of them that I studiously. No, I'm. It's like my kid is my son Will is he's the guy with the Berkeley degree and the took from I think junior year in high school he was taken from Terry Trotter. Who's one hell of a piano player and probably even a better teacher. He's just an unbelievable teacher. So he's one of those guys that can put a chart in front of him and basically read the fly shit off the page. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
One of those guys. And so he's got a Bachelor of Arts and I've got a BA, but mine happens to be a bad attitude, you know? David Foster said that to me one time. He said, "Hey, man, you got a BA in music." I said, "Really? Yeah, bad attitude."
So, well, you see, I started out with a music business degree, but I switched to communications after I realized that where I was going to school, a music degree had very little to do with being a musician. So I actually say I have a BS in BS. So,
right.
So that's
my dad always said PhD means pilot higher and deeper, right?
Well, yeah, it served me pretty well because pretty much I pontificate for a living these days, and it's great. But well, so that answers my second question, which was you started making music pretty early in life. Now, here's one of the questions.
I gave up piano lessons when I was 5, and I'd had them since I was 3. So I mean, I was actually reading music, little Bartok pieces, and nothing. I wasn't reading Rhapsody in Blue by any means, but I was doing pretty well with it, and then it just kind of all stopped. This divorce thing kind of put it out of whack, and to this day, I wish I'd stayed with. It's funny because a friend of my mother's, close friend of my mother's, her son was a piano player also, but he didn't read very well. So what the move was is that she said, "Well, David plays by ear," and I went, hell with his reading. I'm going to learn how to play by ear. So I've got an unbelievable ear, but you put a chart in front of me, and I'm relatively useless.
Well, I can appreciate that. That's but that's the kind of playing that we focus on over at Learning Music is Fun, only because most people who go through traditional lessons are brought up through a certain kind of training, and a lot of those folks don't know how to bridge the gap to actually teach you to use chord symbols and to use your ear and the principles of improvisation and whatnot. And so it's kind of interesting because I had enough formal training that I know how to read music. Just please don't ask me to unless I absolutely have to. You know.
Well, it's like something. It's like a lot of other stuff. If you do it every day, it just gets to be second nature. But if you only do it occasionally, you're going to be coming from behind. I'll tell you, it's an interesting thing that. Let's see, I just forgot what I was going to say. It was pretty cool. Oh, my son, Will. I mean, I had sent him to neighborhood piano teachers for quite a few years, and I would always end up pulling his lessons because he would just wait until half an hour before his next lesson to practice what he was supposed to practice. And then I realized that, you know, you're getting an octave up of "Go Tell Aunt Rhody" yet again, you know. And it was a nice neighborhood teacher. And the thing that was great is he had his fingerings and basic fingerings up and down of all the scales. That he had under his hands, and he had the basic stuff under his hands. But he was just being bored to tears. And I finally hooked up with Terry Trotter, who was expensive, but boy, it was, you know, within a month. I mean, Will sat down at the piano and he says, "Well, play me C sharp, both hands, up and down." He just banged it off, and Terry, the first thing he said to him was, "Now play it with about half the velocity, because if you keep playing as hard as you're playing, you're going to have carpal tunnel in 7 years." I mean, that's a, you know, boom. So, I mean, not only did he play it with half the velocity, he sat up straight, his fingers arched. I mean, he did stuff that he wasn't being asked to do, and it all just came together, and I realized I just saw him instantly take on the posture that he'd have for the rest of his life. You know, it actually reminded me of David Foster, because I mean, one thing that I've always dug about Foster is he really sits up straight when he plays. Me, I'm a Bill Evans guy. and I at this stage of my life, I'm paying dearly for it. So listen, you kids, remember, keep reading music because you're going to need it, and more and more. I mean, people that are still working in this kind of bad economy that's going on in music right now. I mean, it used to be just get guys that sounded really good to be in your backup band if you were Lady Gaga. You know what I mean? Or if you were somebody that really had a career going. Nowadays, readers. That's it.
People have to.
Yeah, it's really kind of coming down to like, well, since there's so many musicians looking for work, let's get the really, really trained ones. Because so that's kind of what's coming down in you know, I mean, since there's, say for instance, there used to be 100 tours going out, and now there's 10. So the musicians that are playing in those 10, you can go for the higher quality cats. You know what I mean?
I have noticed a trend towards more precision playing, very, very specific lines that they want done, and very specifically done consistently that way. As opposed to, you know, I come up from more of a, kind of an Elton John style thing, and Elton never plays anything the same way twice, but he's also built the entire band around what he's doing, so he didn't have to, but that's kind of the exception, not the rule, if you're going to actually get a job as a piano player in a band.
Well, I think there's a lot of, especially a lot of the music that's on radio and stuff like that at this point in the game is so filled with signatures and what I like to refer to as pop devices. That's all there. I mean, look at the lyrics that you hear on any pop song. There's a section that goes, whoa, whoa, whoa. The word "oh" is giant in music now. Because what they're doing is they're kind of dumbing down at some level to try to get a sing-along feel in virtually every song on the radio.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
I would agree. So tell me, who were your big musical influences? Who did you dig that kind of made you want to do more with it?
Well, when I was a kid, you know, I mean, I really liked big band stuff. My mother was a real fan. She had worked more as not an orchestrator, but just as like almost a copyist for Sam Kenton and Pete Rugolo and some of these guys, some of these early guys. When she was in school, it was part of her college. It was part of her college thing. And so I mean I was around that, and then when Elvis hit, I was like, wow, this is cool. Whatever this has got a vibe to it. And I probably was listening more to the guitar solos than I was to the singer. I think most of those guitar solos were Chet Atkins. In the early days of Elvis, on those Sun records and stuff, they'd call Chet in to play on a lot of that. So I mean, there was always something sort of musical in that. And then later on, when I got into R&B, I mean, I went along. as an organist, I was obviously, Jimmy Smith did a lot. I heard Jimmy Smith and I heard just the sound of that thing. I went, I gotta have that. For guitar, I'd say Albert King. Just his guitar tone was just so awesome, just sexy. And then for singing, I think in a lot of ways, at least in terms of phrasing, I always thought Lou Rawls was one of my favorites.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite singers too.
Yeah, I mean, his relaxed phrasing, and we kind of became friends. He says, Lou, what's the story on this back phrasing that you're into? He said, well, I usually forget the words until the last second. Of course, he's just yanking my chain.
Yeah.
Lou was a kid. He's a funny guy.
Yeah, I'd say most people in popular music of one realm or another are a lot more prepared than they let on. And the idea is to look like it's spontaneous, but most of them are pretty well rehearsed and they know their stuff.
Well, yeah, there's really, I think there's really two schools at this point in the game. Is you're going out to interpret what you've worked on, and to try to play it exactly the way you rehearsed it, or you're going out there to kind of run against the wind and hope the wind doesn't stop. Which is sort of a jazz approach to everything. I think is one of the reasons I'm probably not in Chicago anymore. Is I always sang it a little different. I always, I understand the real need for signatures and I understand the real need to establish this is what the song is. But once that's established, I usually take off. Mm-hmm. First of all, because I can. Second of all, because it's that maybe it's a jazz tradition, but you talk about improvisation. I like to let it fly a little bit. And while I'm in front of an audience, a lot of people go, hey, you're in front of an audience, sing it the way they want to hear it. And I'm going to sing it the way I want to hear it right now. And it's different singers coming from different places. I mean, I asked Tristan Bowden about it one time, and he did 12 years with Kenny Loggins. And he said, I asked him, does Kenny sing the songs exactly the same every night? He says, if they did, his audience would take him out in the back and hang him from a tree. They expect him to improvise. They expect him to take off, and they go home going, I heard this, nobody else heard that. Mm-hmm. The people that came to this show tonight heard it this way, and nobody else will ever hear that. So, and other people would say, man, he didn't sing it the way it was on the record.
Yeah, and that's a tough line to tread, but for me personally, I always kind of liked that about you because I thought, I've already got Chicago 19 at home. I can listen to that anytime I want.
Right.
I'm obviously, there it is a little bit of a line you got to tread because it's got to sound enough like Look Away that it's Look Away. But then at some point, what makes it different from the album? So that reminds me of something that you said. It was really profound. I was going to ask later in the interview, but I'm going to just talk about it now because one of the things that I preach a lot to my students is that it's okay to bring yourself to the table and not just constantly try to copy everything. It's okay to copy everything, but it's okay also to be yourself. Because I remember when we talked about this in 2000, I asked you specifically, I said, I noticed that you kind of change up the vocals a lot. And you said, well, when I sing something, I sing it the way I sing it, period. And I really love that. And for people that don't know the history, I think that's a bold move, too, because in Chicago, there was a guy named Terry Kath that passed away that was the original guitarist, and he was kind of, by the time you joined the group, he was kind of legendary status. He was a great singer, and part of your job was to replace his vocals on stage on a lot of those songs. And so to go there and say, well, I'm going to sing it with my own personality and not just try to copy what he did was kind of a bold move. But I always kind of respected that. So,
well, and that was the line. And I think that at some point of the game, the original guys in that band decided that they wanted to, let's just digress just a little bit. The Eagles really pride themselves on going out and sounding exactly like their records, and they do it beautifully. Mm-hmm. It's like, and it's almost an art form in itself, and that's one of the things that people really love about it. To me, that's the antithesis of what I do. I mean, I just got to make it different. It's got to feel. And somebody even said one time, "Man, somebody goes to a Chicago gig, and they hear, and it's nostalgia, 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 and then Bill's singing. It's like I'm here in the building right now." And then now, oops, I'm back in the Chevy with my first girlfriend. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of goes that way. And I figure, what's wrong with being in the building at least once? You know what I mean? Seemed like a good idea.
Hey, I always dug it. So, I mean, I like the other guys in the group too, but I always enjoyed the little bit of change up that came along with that. So, and I
The thing,
also thought that you made the song yours too, since you're the
with
one
those,
there singing it.
yeah, with those Eagles concerts, everybody's kind of sort of almost like at a church going, yeah, exactly, it's perfect. And then Joe gets up and does some, rock way or something, and slams it and does it his own way, and the whole place is and then it's back to the new kid in town, and it's back
Yeah.
to being right straight ahead. All of it valid. Just I don't particularly prefer to be that guy.
Right.
Maybe I might not even have the memory to be that guy anymore. That's and I'm sure that's probably affected my career on numerous levels at numerous times. But the music is there all the time, and you could sometimes if you're copying something, if you're absolutely I'm just going to play it the way I learned it and everything like that. In a lot of ways, you're playing the music, but you're leaving the music behind because I don't know, the music comes from a creative place, and if you're not allowed to create, then sometimes the music goes away. Then you're doing a math quiz.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Tell us about the Sons of Champlin.
Well, the Sons are a band we put together in 1965 as a five-piece, and then added some horns to it in 1967 when Jeff Palmer arrived. Jeff Palmer and a trumpet player named Jim Beam arrived and on the scene out of Chicago, basically, and they were they kind of added some oomph to it. We had one sax player in the band, Tim Kaine, who's actually back in the band after 40-something years, and which is really cool. He still has one of the best tenor sounds of anybody I've ever heard. His tone is ridiculously great, but kind of like a cross between Mike Brecker and Clarence Clemens. I mean, it's
Wow.
like there's some real straight ahead kind of tone, and then there's some rock tone. So he's like really a good rock sax player in a lot of ways. So he's cool. We were playing a gig up there this last weekend. So the Sons play, I'd say we do maybe 3 or 4 gigs a year. Tops.
And did you, when you guys formed the Sons, was it just a way to get work at the time, or did you really have an aim of getting a record deal and making it with the Sons?
Well, everybody wanted to get a record deal. I mean, some people say about the Sons' career is like, when opportunity knocked, we answered the phone. We had we could probably have a whole other thing about bad career moves, and we made them all. We were, the Sons were just a pop band basically, and until the whole psychedelic era came along, and then we all got high basically, and went, wait a minute. There's something different, I really love R&B, but I really can't stand the lyrics. And then I was listening to Bob Dylan records and Beatle records. I said, I don't particularly like this music that much, but the lyrics say something real cool. Why don't we take that and put it into the R&B, unload the oh baby lyrics, and try to write something that means something, and see if we can make that work, And it got us a little bit of notoriety at some level. Sly and the Family Stone kind of came in on the heels of that at some point. A lot of R&B, Earth, Wind and Fire is a classic example. Some of their lyrics at some point of their career were really, really deep. It was really cool.
That's cool.
Written in the Stone and some of those other things were really cool.
So you guys were kind of a phenomenon there in the Bay Area, at least.
A little bit, small pond, big fish kind of thing. And we never really broke out of the Bay Area that much. We just never had we had a little too big a band to be able to afford to go on the road on a regular basis.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about making that joke when you said we had a 5-piece, then we added some horns, and the businessman in me said, just immediately thought, so you guys didn't care about making money then, did you?
That's pretty nice. Well, we were rolling joints and food stamps, high school diplomas and stuff. I mean, it was San Francisco in the mid '60s. You'd have had to have been there. We could take hours and hours, and you'd never get exactly what that meant.
Well, plus, if you remember the '60s, you weren't really there. I keep being told that all the time. So, and did you guys get to make any records?
We made 7 albums as the Sons.
That's cool.
And then actually, this English company has just made, took the first 3 albums, remastered them, and put them out on a 2 CD set that sound pretty good. So we proceeded to buy a bunch of them, and we're selling them at our gigs.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah.
So when did you go solo and break away from the Sons?
Broke away from the band around 1977 and moved down here. I was already kind of friends with David Foster. I had been coming in and singing on a lot of his early productions, doing background vocals and stuff like that. I think
did that happen just because you were friends?
Yeah, we were pals. I mean, we did a Sons album, and Keith Olsen was the producer. Actually out at Sound City, which I guess Dave Grohl just did a whole movie on Sound City. But and Keith was one of the main producers out there that worked in that room. And we did an album with him out there. And then Keith said, "I think you need a couple of these songs. I think it'd be great to put strings on. You know, get a small string section and let them fly. You know." And he says, "I know just the guy that can arrange them." So I met David Foster, and we hit it off right off the bat. And so he did the string date, and we started writing together. And then he said, "Can I get you to come in and sing some backgrounds on some stuff?" So I went in with and he turned me on to Carmen Twilley and Vanette Glaude, who were singers that I sang with for years in town. You know, our little group that we go out and go to just cut records. So I mean, we were, from 77 until 81, I was just doing sessions for Dave.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of fell into it. It was, as my dad said it, the definition of an expert's a guy from the next county.
Yeah, I knew a guy in small town Nebraska, where I'm from, who used to say, "In your own town, you're an idiot, but you become an expert when you hit the city limits, and your degree of expertise will grow with every mile you travel." So
exactly, it's pretty much what it is. But so I got really lucky, and at the time, David Foster and Jay Graydon were going around cutting a lot of basics for a lot of, they were on the basic sessions for a lot of these guys, and David would just tap the producer on the shoulder and say, "Hey, I know you're probably going to get leads and horns or whatever, but when it comes time to do background vocals, you should call this guy." So he gave a lot of guys my number. So I mean, David and Jay kind of got me my first gigs in town, and then the work that I did kind of got me more.
Well, the one thing that I'm guessing was the draw. If I had to pinpoint something about your voice that makes it real ideal for backing vocals, it's that a lot of times your lead singer will have kind of a real pure, kind of soft voice, and when you put that slightly edgier quality with your voice next to it, there's a timbre that comes out of there that's just unmistakable. It's like whenever I hear it, I go, "There's Champlin. I can hear him." It was crazy, which is I'm sure why.
In a lot of ways, that's if I'm plowing a little bit hard, But I kind of in doing all these dates, I kind of found myself using a lot of falsetto and using a lot of mid-range, mid falsetto and stuff like that, which I don't do that much anymore. My full voice goes higher now, so I don't have to sing false and like low false. But I found myself singing alto mostly with Carmen and Eddie, and Carmen Twilley is one of the top singers in Los Angeles and has been for years. Carmen was in the Lion King movies. She sang "Rhythm of Life" or what is it, something like that. Circle of Life. Yeah, that was the singer on that one. So she would sing tenor, I would sing alto, and Carmen's cousin Vanette would sing soprano, and so there was a lot of dates where that was going on. So I found myself, in a lot of ways, it was really cool because when I moved to Los Angeles, I was just nothing but an R&B fan. That's all I cared about. I mean, it was just all James Brown, all Ray Charles, all R&B, And I got down here and I realized if I want to work, I got to be able to access some different kinds of music. Especially I started working with David Foster, and I'd bring in like basically an R&B song, and he'd get it under his hands and would just shits it up, And I go, well, this is kind of cool. I'm going to go this way for a little while because it seems a little more educated. It seems like the music's starting to pull me in a lot of different directions. So I didn't move to LA just for the purposes of just for the purposes of making money. I mean, I found myself having to dig what the Eagles were doing, or having to dig what country music was doing, and having to dig a lot of different kinds of stuff. I mean, I got to where I remember one day I did Donnie and Marie in the morning, Della Reese in the afternoon and Nancy Wilson that night. And it's, I just went from basically from bubblegum pop to gospel, real gospel tinge to jazz, all in one day. So I mean, and there's nothing like that to keep you on your toes, But what was cool about it in those days, they were all head charts. For the most part, it was pretty much head charts. If somebody handed me a session, handed me a vocal chart, I would usually say, you got the wrong guy. Let me give you a number of somebody who's the right guy.
Right. Well, now
and again, we're back to that reading thing. If I just, I think what it is my specialty was coming in and head charting and arranging.
Right.
And sometimes writing choruses. I got $500. This guy's on the top 10. Who wrote that chorus? I did. How did that happen?
Well,
in Nashville, they have a saying, they say, one word, 1/3.
Exactly. Speaking of which, just slightly off topic, I'm surprised that you're in LA. It seems like one day there was a mass exodus of the music industry out in Nashville, and that's where everything is these days.
Well, I was part of it. I just didn't dig it that much. For me, a lot of it really had more to do with weather. I'm a weather sissy. There's no question about it. Once you've lived in LA for a period of time, it's pretty cool. There's something to be said about the way the weather works here. And my allergies were ridiculous. I literally sounded like this most of the time when I was there because they got pollen down there. I realized why all the singers there sound so twangy. They all
have a cold.
Yeah, and it's if it was New York and it would snow when it got cold, it'd be great. But a lot of times, yes, it snowed in Nashville, but very, very rarely. And the rest of the time, it's just this sort of gray, cold and wettish and sort of gray. And it's like, it just didn't do it for me.
Well, and that's...
I really couldn't break the click down there.
That's as good a reason to move as any. I can tell you, I love my home state, but I'll never live in Nebraska again now that I've been in the Southwest. It's just too good of a gig in the winter.
Where do you live? In?
I live just outside of Vegas.
Oh, cool.
So, and I love it. I love the weather and everything. So I will never shovel snow again as long as I live.
All my pals in Vegas are all, he says, man, Jerry Lopez, he says, man, I said, how can you take it here? It's so hot. He says, I'm a desert rat. What can you say? It's the way it is.
I might disappear for 3 months in the summer, but the rest of the year is pretty good. But now, here's a question that I wanted to... So you worked a lot with David Foster. Now, talk to me a little bit about... He came up as a session player first, right?
David Foster is Greg Matheson, you're hip to who Greg is? Mm-hmm. Great keyboard player. And Greg put it correctly. He said, David Foster is the best pop piano player I've heard. Nobody touches his style. He just does these great little moves. So, I started working with him and just realized what a player he was. And when I first met him, I met him as an arranger. He was a string arranger, But he's all things to all people. He's such a good... And it's funny, as his career as a producer, he's had moments where he was really riding high, and then kind of hit a couple of slumps here and there, and it was always his hands that brought him back. Always.
Well, now he's the kind of producer, though, who, when he takes on a project, he'll be all over it, no matter whether it's band or a solo act, right? If we're hearing...
Turns a band into a solo act.
Right.
That's how he relates to it. I think, I love David, but most of the bands that he's produced broke up after he produced them.
And just out of curiosity, why do you suppose that is?
I don't know. Well, I think he has a tendency to find who he wants to work with and cuts them from the herd and lets the rest of the herd you guys just wallow, hang around while I'm busy making this record with this guy. And it gets hits, but getting hits. He did great stuff with the Tubes, and suddenly when it was over with, after a couple of albums, all of a sudden Fee wanted to be like songwriter guy, and Fee was at one time in his career was probably one of the best stage performers I've ever seen, just unbelievable. Anybody who'll get put on a pair of Speedos and dry hump a TV set on stage has to be a pretty fearless stage guy. You know what I mean?
Nice.
And and he's a good songwriter, no question about it. It's always has been. But I think to just drop your concert thing. I mean, the Tubes are back together again. They're playing again, and Fee's with them again. But it's kind of a little late in the game.
Right. Well, I understand. I certainly have seen that pattern before, but you can hardly argue with the results of the quality of the recording. I don't think I've ever heard another producer who puts out such completely clean, like perfect arrangements
Right.
in a way of every single. It's like I feel like I'm listening to a symphony. It's just made
Well,
up with drums and guitar and
yeah. What I learned from David more than anything else is that there's a real fine line between where do you draw the line between a mix and an arrangement. The mix is it's much easier to mix if you're arranged correctly. If you've got everything in the right at the right frequencies, and you put everything in. And that's one of the things that and also David brings in guys. Usually, I mean, even if it's a band record, he brings in ringers. He's always brought in.
like Lukather.
Oh, Luke or Landau for all the Chicago records. I don't think we use any. I mean, Chris might have played on a couple things. Uh, there's, I mean, I don't think Dwayne Bailey ever played on a Chicago
Yeah.
record. He might have on the Stone of Sisyphus, but I think even then we used Bruce Gaich. We used Bruce for that, and we used Bruce for the big band album. Bruce was just a better studio guy, and Dwayne was such a great soloist, unbelievably great player in a lot of ways. A little bit of a nut, but that's safe. Talent is talent. You take what you get with what you get.
Well, tell me, that would bring up an interesting point. A lot of people have no concept of the idea that there are different skill sets for being in the studio and being on stage. So tell me, what's the difference between someone who's good enough to play on stage and someone who's good enough to actually do the sessions for a record like, say, Chicago 17?
Well, first of all, cans lie. You got to realize that the earphones don't really tell the truth. Don't give you the whole picture of what really is going on. When you're playing live, hopefully, you're getting some sound. And this is another thing that we could get into is everyone's using basically earphones, but in-ear monitors on stage. And I have a few problems with that just for me don't work. But it makes it like a studio. So you have to be a studio player, and you have to start playing clean. A lot of engineers demand that the drummers are plexiglass. They're in a cage, and that no amplifiers are on the stage. So all you hear is a little bit of bell from the drums and whatever horns are going on. That's the way it is with Chicago. Bass player doesn't even use an amplifier. Uses a pod. It's crazy. There's no air being pushed. So at that point in the game, it is becoming more of a, what do you call it? More of a math quiz. So here's where the math is, here's where it sits, here's what you do with this, and here's what you do with that, and this fits with this, which fits with this. And after a while, you're going, where's this thing, the thing of and also another thing is when you're hearing, you got to mix, you got to mix the way you want it, you start hearing what you really need to hear to perform your own thing correctly. So what happens if, like for instance, when you play, I'll set my rhythm guitar with earphones, I'll set rhythm guitar at a certain level. And then when he plays a lead, I don't really hear his lead. So what happens if the guitar player has the night of his life? And when somebody else plays a solo that's just awesome, it makes me play better. If I play a solo that's just awesome, it makes him play better. And there's how the show gets bigger and better. And you start feeling that stuff of like, hey, there's some really cool stuff happening here. Mm-hmm. Or you just go out and play exactly what you've practiced. And your in-ear monitors are telling you exactly what's going on. And the other problem with in-ear monitors is it's really easy to start flying vocals. It's really easy to start flying horns. You're playing against a click. Next thing you know, you're just doing a record. You got your record there.
Personally, I've noticed this over the last I noticed it starting to happen about 15 years ago, but in the last 10 years, I go to a lot of concerts, and the mixing has become so clean at these shows that it actually is a little bit off-putting for me because there's not enough noise in a way, and it doesn't feel live in some cases like it used to.
A lot of times it isn't.
Yeah.
Or more than you think. A lot more than you think. A lot of times it's not live. There's a click being generated. There's horn doubles. There's vocal doubles, and then sometimes you're talking. There's lead vocal. You know, it's only a matter of time where you say, "Man, I'm really tired. Can you fly the lead?" You know, boom, and there you go. It's too easy to do, and then the next thing you know, it's Milli and Vanilli. You know?
Yeah, and I try not to be too critical of that because I'm a one-man band, but
it's kind of what's expected, and I think it's going to always be what's expected from audiences, and I think that this whole thing of having new music come flying out at you, or new solos or new something flying out at you is just becoming rarer and rarer and rarer to the point where it's just going to eventually go away. Then all you're going to do is you're going to make your records, and then you're going to go out and sync it. And that's what a lot of people expect, as long as the dance moves are great and the trapeze artists are dressed well, you know. Then so I don't know. I don't particularly. There's some bands that I don't think should do that. I guess if you're going to see a Cher concert, maybe it's better to have it that way. If you're going to see Lady Gaga, maybe it's better to have it that way. I just don't. I personally don't like it. It's like, hey, that's. If I want to go see somebody play, I want to see them play. I don't want to see them act like they're playing.
Yeah, well, I like the raw quality that I used to hear even in the early '90s, and so that I feel is sort of, and I've noticed that it's in the age of inner ear monitors, which I've used, and I don't care for them at all because for me, I can't interact with people.
You're kind of isolated. You're not part of the whole thing. Then you're, hey everybody, how you doing? It's not because you're excited about the music. It's because you're acting. So and once again, a lot of the musicians that are being hired are good at acting. Because that's what they're going to be, you're going to do it this way, or I get somebody else who will. So that's a lot of, I'm not saying don't do it because it's not fun. I'm saying learn how to do it as well as you can and get whatever fun you can out of it if you're looking for, remuneration from playing,
Right.
You're looking to get on the road and get with a band that's playing in front of a lot of people. Clubs, I think the best place to hear music at this point in the game is clubs because very rarely do you have that happening there.
Right.
The smaller gigs, it's you don't see Bruce Hornsby doing this. You know what I mean? This is a musical thing. But you don't see Bruce Hornsby on the front of People magazine every week. The way you do certain artists. I think John Mayer is probably pretty cool as far as being a straight ahead musician. There's a couple things out there that are just playing, and they're good, and it's all happening. But I think a lot of the real arena gigs, not much going on like that.
They've gotten a little boring to me. I know I will go to some things in an arena if it's the only setting that I can see it in, but I'd actually much prefer a smaller setting for exactly what you're talking about. I like to hear the drums, not because they're mic'd, because you can hear them being hit.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's talk a little bit. So when you, correct me if I'm wrong, you were offered the Chicago gig shortly after Terry died in like '78 or something, right? And you turned it down?
Yeah, well, I thought what I was being offered was a guitar chair. And yes, I do play guitar, and I'm pretty good on one solo, but I couldn't cut the whole night. There's no way. I mean, not what, fill those shoes?
Right.
Kath was quite a good guitar player. Somebody needed to not necessarily play like him, but to have at least enough of a repertoire to be able to. So I mean, I passed it on to Carmen, and Carmen almost had the gig. It came real close, right up to where Donnie Dacus got the gig.
Okay.
Because I think Donnie really, really learned this stuff big time. I don't think Carmen quite had it as together.
Was it a tough decision for you in '82 when you got offered again to take the gig?
Yeah, it was kind of weird. I just made my Runaway album, and it was on. We had a singles deal at Elektra. David and me put together 3 songs for the album, and then we handed it in. So I'd pick 2 out of these 3 for the single, And Joe Smith was the president of Elektra at the time, and he says, "Hey, this is really good. Why don't you do an album?" Okay, let's do an album. And then David had already signed on to do the Tubes at a certain time, so we went ahead and did the Tubes, and then we did my album. We finished up my album, and then when we submitted that, Joe Smith had just left the company, and I could tell right away. It's like, "Oops, I just had another. This ain't gonna fly. It's not gonna happen." It got to number 10 on the AC charts. And half of the people at the record company didn't know I was on Elektra. They had a number 10 record. They didn't know who the artist was. It's weird, totally weird. So that came down right around the time, and I had just met the guys, and actually cut a song. Went in and played second piano, and cut a song with them that ended up on the first album that me and Dan Serafin had written. And Danny had was producing something else for a friend of mine named Angelo. And they got Peter and me to sing backgrounds on it, and everybody in the booth. The minute we sang together, everybody in the booth went, "Whoa, here's the plane. How's this working?" And so both Peter and I listened back and went, "Hey, that sounds pretty good. That's something we could, you know." So I mean, after a little while, I got the call to join the band, and then Danny was on the phone with me. He says, "Well, we hear you singing, maybe Make Me Smile." I said, "Yeah, okay, I like that song. I still sing that song. I've always dug that tune." He said, "Color My World." He says, "Danny, let me get back to you." So I sang it for a while, and eventually Lamb said, man, I'll do it. I'll sing it like Terry did. Great, that's good. You go ahead on. Please don't throw me in the briar patch.
Cool. Well, one thing I really wanted to touch on too is a lot of people don't really understand exactly what you're committing to when you commit to playing in a band like that. I mean, talk about what kind of a commitment you had to make if you were going to join a group like Chicago. I mean, that's basically going to be all consuming for as long as you're in a group, basically.
But the money, you're paid for it. So the money, for me, the gig was like, I don't see my album as happening. I don't see there's any way this thing can happen. Because just as my album was being released, the Elektra was in a mess. So I went, here's another one that's going to go down the tubes. I could see, and it's a great album. I mean, it was people in Europe and Scandinavia consider it one of the 5, desert island records that you got to have, And so at any rate, so I kind of went, this may be a gig that might do the trick. I was just about to get married. Tamara and I got married right on the heels, right around the time that happened, and we just kind of went, let's take a run. I figured I'd give it 5 years. I gave it 28.
Well,
and what that was, and I've been kicking myself for staying as long as I stayed at the thing, but the money it was hard to walk away from the money. So I mean. When it's just you can say money isn't everything, and you can, if you're unhappy with something, you bail from it, whether you make money or not. But when you got kids and houses and that kind of.
Well, that's the thing. It's a job.
Yeah.
It's a job. People forget that because you're famous and you're this and that, but it's a job. Being in the music industry is a job.
At the beginning, there was, especially when Peter was in the band, there was, he didn't want to. Didn't want to go out that much and make sure that there were breaks between it. Now, in the last 10 years I was in there, you were on call at all times. If a gig came up on your break, you say you want to go to Hawaii, you either send in a sub, which, let's put it this way, my sub now has my gig. How's that? So you can send in a sub, but that leaves you vulnerable.
Unless you play bone or saxophone.
Yeah. Well, we won't even go into that.
Yeah, I don't want to either. I was just saying, because I've been to some of those gigs, but I had never seen one without the lead singers. So, but what's a tip? I was just going to ask what a typical tour schedule is like in a situation like that, because I know I've seen you say on an interview before that you've never been busier with Chicago than you were in the last few years, which I thought was interesting, considering that they weren't really a real recording act much for a while. I mean, per se, in the way that they were when you first joined the band.
They put out a million greatest hits record. I don't know how many times 25 or 64 has been recut and resold. It's like, give me a break, you know. When they had, especially when they had their own record company, it was just, we'll do 2 new songs and a bunch of the old ones. 2 new songs, a bunch of the old ones. 2 new songs, a bunch of the old ones. That went on forever.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and then when we did a full album, then it just got into, this got crazy. But yeah, that's all Chicago. Let's just leave those guys alone.
Oh no, actually, my point with this line of questioning isn't really to get into Chicago as much as I'm wondering, when you're on tour, how many weeks on are you on, and then how much break time do you get? I mean, what is it like to be on a big tour like that?
Originally, Peter always said, you know, we'd do 21 days. They ended up talking him into 24 because that's another, you know, one more weekend. And then you got to have at least 10 days break.
Mm-hmm.
It's just because the band's starting to do this. It's going downhill. It's starting to. So you get a break. Everybody gets a little breath of fresh air. You go back out. You're there. And you know, when I first joined the band, it was maybe 6 months of playing a year. And the last 10 years, I think it was maybe 9 to 10 months of playing. I mean, it's just nonstop. I think somebody along the line went, we'll take everything that's out there, every opportunity. We'll take every gig that's being offered.
Right.
So there's plenty of gigs out there for those guys. It's the ever ready bunny. They just keep going and going and going.
Well, how many gigs do you play now?
Nah, man, I'm lucky to play 3 or 4 gigs a month. You know, which is actually, to tell you the truth, fine. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
well,
I don't want to work that much on the road. It just makes me crazy. You know.
Well, I understand. That's one of the reasons I live out by Vegas, because I am a working musician, but I like the fact that there's enough work out here. I can do 100 dates a year, but I can sleep in my own bed 85 of those times, and I like that, you know. So I just was curious. I wanted to paint a picture of what it's like to actually be on tour, not specifically with Chicago, but just in a big situation like that.
Just general, yeah. It's usually the bus. I think even the big bands that used to do, I'd say the Eagles have probably got their own airplane at this stage of the game, or if not, just they got one rented. So you get the airplane flies you in, and then you got to rent ground transportation, you know, vans or limos or whatever. So I think a lot of people started just going into, you know, following the country acts and going with the bus. So we kind of went with the bus. Starting from maybe 87, 88, something like that. So it's just been busing ever since then. And it's like, what you do is you fly out, you pick up the bus, and the bus goes, you know, maybe probably no more than 500, maybe 500 a day. You know, as far as, you know, what you do is you pretty much go, you know, you're kind of stuck to how many one-nighters you can do by where the truck with all the equipment goes. Hang on one second.
No problem.
Hello. Yes, I'm doing this thing. Okay, bye. But so you know, the way we did it, we get off the stage, we'd get on the bus, you know, schmooze with, you know, get a meet and greet, get on the bus, and drive to the next gig and check into the hotel, and then check out around, you know, 5 and go to the next gig. I mean, sound checks. I think the last sound checks that I remember having with Chicago was in the 90s.
Crazy. So you slept a lot on the bus.
No, I didn't sleep well on the bus. You know, I would usually be up all night and then try to sleep at the hotel and then try to figure some time to get to the gym and try to, you know, get some kind of wake up thing going. You know, I'm not a real good bus traveler. I'll go to sleep right away, but once I wake up, I'm up for the rest of the night.
Righto.
So that after you know, maybe the last 10 years, it just was it was just my sleep patterns were just, you know, completely. I don't know, if I'd have kept doing it, it probably would have killed me.
Well, let's talk quickly about No Place Left to Fall before we wrap up.
Cool.
I think that is a spectacular album, by the way. It's one of the best things I've heard, and I've got all of your solo records, and I like them all, but this one I thought was especially good work and really, really eclectic. I kind of like that. How'd that come about?
Well, you know, there was a deal to start with a little startup record company that turned out not to be the next, Island Records or CBS. It didn't go that far, but they gave it a shot, and there was a deal, there was a budget, and there was a co-producer who knew what he was doing. Mark Edinger was. At least for that record, he was really cool. He was there, and while I was in the studio, he could kind of hold down what was going on. We had a great engineer, and we decided to do it the old-fashioned way. We got 3 days of rehearsal. We went in with the band, I had the demos, whatever demos in whatever shape they were in. Some of them were great, some of them not so great, but enough for the band to hear where they are. We banged off some real rough charts on them, and then just started playing them until we found out, like, the whole band helped in the arrangement of the songs. The whole band was there from the beginning, from taking it from the ground floor up. And then we did that in Nashville when I was still living there. I had a studio there, so I did all my vocals there when we were done. But we tracked in New Jersey, about an hour north of Newark, at a place that in the summertime is like a Hope Hat Column, New Jersey. This little church that somebody built a really good studio, and we had a really good engineer. So what we did is we got out of Nashville, we got out of our own home area, and we went up to Jersey. So we wouldn't have hey man, I got to go pick up the kids at school. All the band had to make arrangements to get all their home stuff covered while we were gone doing this. So we got out. It was kind of like music camp, the hotel, the studio. That was it. So. And in that sense, that was really cool because distractions were down to a minimum. And we decided to make the record by picking good songs, for the most part, good songs, picking good tunes, arranging them. I had an idea what the song "No Place Left to Fall" was going to do, and then George Hawkins on bass started playing eighth notes on it. I went, really? He says, yeah, think of it like a ballad, but kind of a U2 thing. He started playing it, and I went, oh, man, that's cool. And then Billy went, I'm going to put down the drumsticks and play it with my hands. So he started playing with his hands. And he didn't hit the bass drum until the second verse. The bass drum that you hear on that song is actually the first, or the tom-tom with his fist. He's playing with his tom. Then when he finally hit the bass drum, it was like even giant, even bigger. So, and then Jason Casaro is a great engineer, well-known engineer. He was involved in tracking for the Back in the High Life, Steve Winwood record, and I think he produced. I'm pretty sure he produced or at least he tracked and mixed most of Soundgarden's stuff. So he's kind of a rock engineer. So I mean, I think we had the right combination of stuff to do, and we just got a feel on the record. That was really what we wanted, is to make sure we got a really good feel. Billy's a great drummer.
It was just kind of a great jam. There's a great vibe just kind of going all the way through that record, and like you said, I kind of like the sound of it. It's something I haven't heard in a while. It sounds like a group that got tight together and just worked on it all the way through, as opposed to, because it really is. A lot of people would be shocked how many folks are not. That are listed as being a part of the band are not actually playing on these things. So you had a lot of cool guest stars on that, including your son. I bet you're kind of a proud papa with what he's been up to lately.
Well, I was a proud papa of Will when I was, I saw him graduating from Berkeley and getting his diploma handed to him by Ron Carter. Wow, how cool is that? He's an amazing musician. We're just hoping for the best for him. He's doing pretty good, and he's, in a way, you got to hand it to him. He's kind of keeping it indie a little bit. He's out on the Voice tour because he's contracted for that.
Which, anyone who doesn't know, Bill's son Will Champlin was a finalist on The Voice recently. What did he end up, third in that?
Third.
Yeah, he did really well, and he's smoking good. He's I think I've heard him call himself a triple threat. I'd say he's a quadruple threat because he can play, he can sing, he can produce, and he can write. I mean, it's not much you can't ask him to do. So
yeah, he's got it. He's got it all covered. He plays great drums. He plays great bass. Unbelievable. He's not the best lead guitar player in the world, but he's one of the best wah-wah rhythm players I've ever heard. He just has a certain groove with the wah-wah. I mean, anything he touches usually turns up. He's playing banjo lately. He's just unbelievable. He picks up something and he just lives on it for 6 months and puts it down, and it's just yet put another check mark on the list of stuff that he plays. He's awesome.
You get to work with him much?
Not too much lately. I mean, he's kind of doing his own thing, and I'm leaving him alone. I mean, where would age 30, slamming, doing all the stuff you're doing? What do you want to do? Hang out with Dad? I mean, occasionally something comes up, we play together.
Nice. Well, Bill, that probably is about where we need to bring this to a close. I cannot thank you enough for joining us today and giving us your insights on the industry. It's really fun to hear the nuts and bolts, and we all like to geek out over here a little bit. We're into the music industry, and it's kind of nice to get past the BS that most of the public thinks it's all about. So,
no, it ain't that.
No,
not
no, and it's a craft and it's a real job, and that's really what I'm trying to show, is that this is something people work at and they work hard at it, and it's got to be a passion. Most people don't make any money at it, but the ones who do have certainly earned it. I don't know anyone who's done the stuff that you've done that haven't put in a hell of a lot of 20-hour days in their time, and so it's really a pleasure to have you here. So thank you very much. I hope that our paths will cross again sometime. Maybe there will be a piano there and we can trade a few licks. But in the meantime,
well, if you're near Vegas, if I get up there, you can usually find me on Monday nights over at the Palms.
All right, man. I'll keep an eye. I'll keep an eye on your schedule. And if people want to get your solo work, is iTunes the best option? iTunes, Amazon, anything like that?
iTunes, Amazon are probably good. I mean, almost all of them have it. Right. Pretty sure.
Well, I'll be sure to find them and put a link up for people, because
cool.
I'm sure this will create a few new fans for you.
Great.
One of my favorite things about your career is that you're not really that famous by name, but you've done such high-profile work. I'm like, that guy is my hero, because I don't want to be famous, but I sure would like to get in on some of that big stuff.
Yeah. Well, I met Donna Summer one time. Said, "Bill, you're the best known unknown singer in the world."
Well, thank you very much. And everyone, this has been Bill Champlin with Conversations with the Masters. I'm piano man Steve Lungrin signing out and reminding you that if you're not having fun when you're making music, you're doing it wrong. All right, we'll see you.
All right, thanks, buddy.
Bye-bye.